Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 261, and the most powerful word in grief.
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, Grief Expert, Widow, and Mom, Krista St-Germain.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Listen, my birthday was last week, and I would love it if you haven't before. Would you leave a rating or a review on the podcast if it's helped you? That would be such an amazing, even belated birthday present to me, because it is still my goal to reach at least 1 million of the 11 million widows that are in the US alone. Amazing if we reach more worldwide. That is also happening too, because I have clients in lots of different countries. But your rating, your review of the podcast really helps get other people to listen. It helps get it in front of other people so that they can find it and it can help them. Whether they ever join any of my paid programs or not, I really want the podcast to get to more people. So if you would do that, I would be grateful. When this launches, I will be actually in Connecticut for a conference for equity-centered coaching, which I'm really excited about. I'll get to see some people in person that I haven't seen in a while, and I'll be speaking at the event and also having my photos done with my favorite photographer, which I have not had the opportunity to work with in way too long, but we're going to be at the same event at the same time. So I'm taking the opportunity to have her do some photos for me, which is amazing. She makes you feel so good in front of the camera. No matter what's going on, she just makes you feel great. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay. Last announcement before we dive into today's topic, which is that Grief Essentials starts June 4th. This is probably going to be the only time I teach it live. That's my current plan. I'm going to teach it live this time, and then subsequent rounds, I won't be teaching it live, but this time I will. And I have kind of steered away from using the word early. In some podcasts where I talked about Grief Essentials, I talked about how it's for early grief. I don't want you to get caught up in the word early, because it's really less about how much time has passed and more about what you're struggling with the most in grief. So Grief Essentials is for you if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by grief. If you're kind of wishing for like an easy button, right? If it feels intense and chaotic and it's hard to imagine how it could feel less than that, and you really wish you had tools and support and accurate information, because I believe that's exactly what we need to make it easier. That's what Grief Essentials is for. Mom Goes On is for when you are back to functioning. You're no longer overwhelmed by that most chaotic part of grief, but you aren't loving your life again. You're stuck in the grief plateau. So Grief Essentials for you if grief is overwhelming and it's chaotic and just a lot, which is what it is for most of us in the beginning. Mom Goes On is for when you're back to functioning. You're no longer trying just to survive. You're back to functioning, but you're feeling hollow and empty and robotic. And you don't want to stay in that grief plateau. You want to get back to loving life again. Two very different programs for two very different experiences in grief. So coachingwithkrista.com/grief essentials. If you want to join us in Grief Essentials or learn more about it, coachingwithkrista.com/work with me if you want to learn about Mom Goes On. So, okay, let's get into it. I actually wrote an email on today's topic and shared it with those of you who are on my email list. If you're not on my email list, coachingwithkrista.com, you can click on the little grief quiz that's at the top right and complete the grief quiz and get on the email that way. There's a free course there. You can get on the email that way. But I send out lots of what I believe are very hopeful emails, very hopeful, very useful emails. And so what I want to share with you in today's podcast episode came from one of those emails. And I talk about it all the time, but I've never really gone so far as to do a podcast episode on it. And I think it's important. So I think that when you are experiencing grief, there is a word that's so powerful, we could almost call it magical. It's easy to spell, and it only has 3 letters. And I'll give you a second to guess so I don't spoil it for you. You got it? If you need a hint, it's in the title of this podcast episode. Okay. The word I'm talking about is and. A-N-D. And. And here's why I think it's magical. There are so many false binaries in grief that make it harder than it needs to be. For example, I remember hearing, and I bet you've heard this too, we can either be sad that they died or grateful that they lived. A big giant ugh on that one. We can either be sad that they died or grateful that they lived. That's not true. I think it's a load of crap. We don't have to choose between being sad that they died or being grateful that they lived. We can be both. We can be both. But that's not what we're being told, right? And that doesn't make for a cute little Instagram graphic. And this is why a lot of us end up kind of forcing ourselves to feel grateful because we think that it's a binary. We think that it's either or. We think that we have to be one or the other. And we've been taught that we don't want to be sad, right? The goal is to be happy of life, of course. Insert sarcastic tone here. So then we try to make ourselves grateful. That's not so helpful because then the sadness that is there and needs to be felt doesn't get felt. It gets pushed down, suppressed, ignored, avoided. And if you've been in grief for a while, you know that whatever it is we try to get away from, it's like it multiplies, right? It will wait for us, all of those feelings. So we don't want to create these either or situations where only one way is the right way. And none of that would be necessary, this forced gratitude or sweeping sadness under the rug. None of that would be necessary if we used the word and. And instead we said, we can be sad that they died and grateful that they lived. Both can coexist. And in grief helps us make room for everything that we feel. And everything that we feel is part of grief. All the emotions apply. And create space so that grief can be nuanced because it is. And so is being human. So here are some ways I hope you'll use and. Think about this. You're having a day and you tell yourself or tell your friend later after the day is over, I was doing so great today until I cried. Okay. What if we replace the word until with the word and? I was doing great today and I cried. And make space for the tears. And doesn't make the tears wrong. We were doing great and also we cried. It's not either or. Or there's this one. I was so proud of myself, but then I got angry. As though we can't be proud of ourselves and get angry. So let's swap it out. Let's use and. I was so proud of myself and I got angry. Both can be true. Anger is just as much a part of our human experience and a part of our grief experience as any other emotion. It doesn't mean anything about us. It doesn't mean that we can't be proud. Feeling a feeling. Here's one more. I feel lost without them, but I'm discovering strengths I never knew I had. Okay. How about instead of but, we just go with and. I feel lost without them and I'm discovering strengths I never knew I had. Both can coexist. We don't have to find strengths and avoid feeling lost. We can feel lost and also discover strengths that we never knew we had. Do you see? We want to open it up. We want to broaden the way that we measure our success. We want to get away from the false binaries, the either ors. And I'll give you one last one because this to me is really a big one. I genuinely used to think in the earlier days of grief that in order for me to love my life again, I was going to have to be grateful for every part of it. And I'm not exactly sure where I picked that up. I suspect Oprah had something to do with it. No offense, Oprah. But I'm pretty sure that I learned somewhere that gratitude trumps all. And in order to really, truly love life, that you have to be grateful for every single thing that's happened to you. And I just don't believe that anymore. In fact, I think it's crap. I think it's nonsense. I am not grateful that Hugo died. And I love my life. It's not either or. I don't have to be grateful that he died in order to love my life. And neither do you. We can still believe something that happened to us isn't wonderful and love life. Okay? So here's to embracing the and. How can you make use of this? How can you create room for nuance and humanness in your grief? And is where it's at. That's what I think. All right. That's what I have for you this week. Remember, I love you. You've got this. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work With Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.